posting resources on all of these issues. You need to be posting like church history for dummies, or something. You need to be defining basic terms. You need to also be thinking that the documents that might explain your doctrines to you are not the documents that would explain it to a reporter. It would help if you dealt with professionals within your traditions to help you do that. I could just give you an example from my own life. In the mid-'80s, I was preparing to fly to Salt Lake City for an interview with 2 members of the 12 at the Mormon Church. And I probably read about 800 to 1,000 pages of material in that interview. I read all kinds of things. And what helped me the most, Sunday school material. How someone explained the faith to children and young people actually ended up being far more appropriate for being able to understand what I could put in a newspaper than, lofty theological battles between different people within different schools of thought. I even found the hymnal to be crucial. If you're trying to explain a controversial belief of your church, post a hymn that contains a reference to it. Post some just very basic materials you would hand out to a newcomer at your church. But organize it by the questions that a reporter would be asking. Like, what does charismatic mean? Well, believe me, it means a considerably different thing to a Pentecostal Christian, in an Assembly of God church than it does in a Catholic church. I mean, you've got to learn to make these distinctions. Okay, moving on. Here's a piece of advice that I heard the other day. This shocked me. I did a column in November the 23rd, where I interviewed the pastor of Sarah Palin's church about what he learned about the media through the process of being Sarah Palin's pastor. Now, this was an interesting conversation. You talk about a guy who had been to hell and back several times in the field of media relations. And his number one suggestion, and I had not thought yet of this impact of the internet age. Before you accept an interview, let alone before you allow it to be conducted, you must know who the reporter actually is. Just because the sticky note on your telephone from your receptionist says, a guy called, he's written for the Associated Press, does not mean that he is not seeking an interview for sarahpalinIsADummy.org. Right? I mean, we live in an age where people write in all kinds of different forums. You urgently need to actually identify who people are. I think it would also help you, in many cases, if you could identify the weblogs about your traditions that are good and the weblogs that are bad. Now, this may still be a blog that occasionally publishes stuff that drives you crazy, but there are people out there who do amazing work. Just this week, we watched a young man who speaks fluent Italian working out of the basement of his house in Philadelphia, who runs a little blog called Whispers in the Logia, scooped the Los Angeles Times on the retirement of their own cardinal. I mean, just had the whole document, translated it out of Italian, had the whole shooting match. The LA Times hasn't written a story yet. I mean, other than like a little bit, and then of course one paper said, Los Angeles begins process to pick its next archbishop. I mean, it's, as if LA is going to pick their bishop, not Rome. I mean, so now we're back to polity. I mean, right? I mean, so know who the good guys are, know who the bad guys are. Read, I mean, from your perspective, I know that. Read your critics. Be prepared to debate and dialogue with them. When they get something right, praise them for getting it right, as well as telling them when they get it wrong. If you're a Catholic communicator and you are not reading Andrew Sullivan, you are not reading the single most influential person in America on influencing the United States press on what Catholics think. You need to be reading that side. Next, do not hide. Folks, there was a day when what I'm about to recommend to you would be considered incredibly rude and aggressive, and I will argue that it is now essential. I think it would be good if you hardly ever accepted an interview with a major publication or network in which you did not make a condition of the interview that you will take it to. I have landed many a difficult interview in my day when people thought I, saw my paper as hostile or whatever. And frankly, the interview with 2 members of the 12 in Salt Lake City is a good example. They taped it, I taped it. Nobody considered that rude on either side. They knew that I knew that they knew that I knew what everybody said, right? So to some degree it raised trust. And I knew that if I blew a quote, it was going to be sent to my editor. That's not a bad thing. In the age of the internet, post it. Do the interview, post the transcript. Can't hurt, right? If anything, you're going to point future reporters to information. It's a resource. Just as major speeches by your leaders are resources. Just as the Cardinal of Boston's blog has become essential reading for anyone who wants to understand what's going on in Catholicism in America. He posts some amazing, whether you agree with it or not, he posts some amazing material there explaining his decisions and his emotions about his daily life. He's quite talented at it. I've quoted his blog already once or twice, in columns. I'm not going to get an interview anytime soon with the Cardinal of Boston. He's a rather busy guy. But I can quote his blog and just say, well, I'm quoting from his blog. And that's fine. My editors don't mind that. Don't hide, but use the internet for constructive sharing of materials. And if it sounds hostile, that you want to record at the same time, so be it. The reporters will get over it. I think it's now become a necessity. In other words, I didn't say that, prove it. Okay, yes, I think I'll send your publisher a transcript. That's not a bad thing to be able to say.